Welcome to Normal Islands Live. My name's Curtis Daly, and I'm really excited and honoured to be joined by political economist and Novara Media contributor Kieran Andrieu. Kieran, how are you this evening?
Curtis, I feel like I've somehow managed to escape Novara Towers just long enough to accompany you tonight. So I'm feeling really good. It's great. It's great to be here with you. I feel like it's been a suspiciously long time I've been waiting to be invited. But
Hey, look, it's good things come to those who wait, right? So, of course, that was my strategy, and extend my thanks for Novara for letting you out to speak to us. But now I'm really excited, and I'll tell you what, given the political turmoil we have, your expertise and analysis is much needed.
thank you very much. Thank you
But
very much.
this is what we've got coming up on tonight's show. The media smears a school in Bristol as anti-Semitic after Labour MP Damien Egan was stopped from attending. Labour with another U-turn, this time on digital IDs, and Donald Trump threatens action against Iran. You can help us grow by visiting turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work, or by becoming a YouTube member. But on to our first story of the evening. Labour MP Damien Egan for Bristol North East was due to visit Bristol Brunel Academy, but was cancelled. Yet the way in which the media has spun this story would lead you to believe this is another case of anti-Semitism, as Egan is Jewish. The Times ran a story with this headline: Anti-Semitism in plain sight must meet full force of the law. The case of a Jewish MP banned from his local school underscores the continuing threat posed by the most ancient of hatreds in Britain. The Telegraph, they ran with this: Bristol shows where dangerous multiculturalism can lead. Now, those were more overt examples, but this headline again from the Times is more subtle, but just as poisonous. Jewish MP banned from school after pro-Palestinian campaign. So is the school anti-Semitic? Well, if you took the media at face value, then you may well believe that. The important point the headlines miss is that he's vice chairman of Labour Friends of Israel, which puts into perspective that last headline. Now, it could have read pro-Israel MP, but they decided to use Jewish MP. Now, let's take a closer look at the first article. It was supposed to be a routine visit to a constituency school for Damien Egan, the Labour MP for Bristol North East. It turned out to be anything but. In September, Mr Egan was abruptly banned from entering Bristol Brunel Academy, not because of any fault on his part, but simply because he happened to be Jewish and vice chairman of the group Labour Friends of Israel. Now, I love how they gloss over that. Oh, he just happened to be vice chairman of a group that advocates for a state committing genocide. I mean, you don't just happen to be, you choose to be vice chair. A very deliberate and conscious decision. Let's continue with the article. It is nothing short of disgraceful that Mr Egan was barred from carrying out a basic duty of an MP. It is shocking also that some parents of children at the academy threatened to keep their children at home should Mr Egan's visit go ahead. Unsurprisingly, members of the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign played a role in blocking the visit. The NEU, Britain's largest teaching union, with more than 450,000 members, must urgently examine the extent of anti-Semitic agitation within its ranks and sanction members who were responsible for Mr Egan's inclusion. The ugly reality is that Mr Egan was targeted purely because of his religion and stance on the Jewish state. Had he been a Russian, he would no doubt have received a warm welcome. The incident is just another example of the discrimination suffered by Jews in Britain. This manifests itself in different ways. The decision of West Midlands Police to ban fans of the Maccabi Tel Aviv football team showed how hardline elements in the Muslim community in the region were able to drown out the concerns of the local Jewish community. Now, no surprise that the attention has turned to so-called sectarian politics of the Muslim community. This was echoed by the Telegraph. What we are witnessing is the importation of foreign conflicts into British public life, not as distant matters of foreign policy, but as emotive causes that override local norms and institutions. When Jewish public figures are singled out or treated as proxies for a foreign conflict, the consequences are deeply troubling. At the heart of this incident lies an abdication of civic authority. Institutions are no longer prepared to assert their authority in the face of organised pressure. Cancelling a visit is easier than confronting protesters, but every such decision emboldens those who believe that disruption works. A diverse society can only function if there is a shared commitment to common civic norms. When imported grievances begin to override these norms, and absolutism replaces pluralism, the social fabric phrase. Britain has long prided itself on accommodating differences, but accommodation cannot mean institutional paralysis. Well, that's very interesting. Maya Roston, who wrote this article, seems to think that importing foreign politics into this country is a bad thing. Yet, who are the most sectarian of all? The Zionists. I mean, we have lobby groups that advocate for another state. We have Labour and Conservative Friends of Israel. No one complains about sectarian politics there. Kieran, I find it really hard to believe that given everything that's happened since the 7th of October, that these arguments are going to work. I'm not sure if people are going to buy it. What's your take on this?
Well, first of all, it's a very important story, so I'm very glad we're covering it. But in the end, Curtis, it comes down to something quite simple, doesn't it? This is just a very transparent attempt to try and reheat the old conflations between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism that were so potent and powerful and indeed career-destroying in 2018, 2019, particularly 2019. And you're right to highlight October 7th as something of a watershed or a Rubicon moment, because since then, the power of that, the value of it, the utility of it has massively, massively declined. It's diminished. And it's diminished for very obvious reasons, which is that people more than ever can see that the state of Israel is a state, that it acts as states do for instrumental purposes. And in this case, it's committing a little thing called genocide. And in those circumstances, trying to hide behind the conflation of Judaism or Jewishness with Zionism, I would submit becomes much less effective. So that's the first thing. We're in a kind of, Nietzschean sort of eternal return state of affairs with politics and discourse generally. And it's very clear that this is a very faded attempt at taking us back. And fool us once, and by us I mean the sort of left or the liberal left, fool us once, shame on you, fool us twice, shame on us. And actually, I'm very happy to say that, knock on wood so far, the left, by and large, hasn't bowed to the kind of pressure that it did previously bow to in the context of the attempted conflation of the state of Israel with all Judaism and Jewishness. So that's a positive thing. So yeah, I think in answer to what you're saying, it's certainly not going to work anywhere near as effectively. And another point about all of this, I met Damien Egan once when he was head of Lewisham Council. I had no idea that he had anything to do with Labour Friends of Israel. There's a very, very easy test, isn't there, for this kind of thing? If a Jewish MP went to Bristol or any other school and was not a member of Labour Friends of Israel and had not gone on record defending or acting as apologist for a genocidal state and was barred from being there, then of course that would be anti-Semitism and we would all line up to condemn it. It's a very, very simple test. It's one that they will never agree to submit to or participate in because they know they would fail it. They being the Damien Egans and his outriders in the media and Starmer and all of the others who are baggage handlers for the Israel lobby and trying to confect a fraudulent scandal out of this. That would be a very simple test, wouldn't it? And it'd be one that they fail. But it's not one that any of these quarters want to pay any attention to because, as I say, they know what the outcome would be.
I mean, I want to get your view on the right-wing media and this new layer of what we're seeing when it comes to the conflation of anti-Semitism and criticism of Israel. Is that it feels like that, and in tandem with what we're seeing as right-wing forces condemning multiculturalism. It's a now mainstream idea that multiculturalism is somehow failing. And many parts of the media are trying to explicitly tie this to the pro-Palestine movement. It feels like this is a proxy to Islamophobia. What's your view on this sort of new condemnation of multiculturalism whilst linking it with people's views on Israel-Palestine?
Well, first of all, the way that the internal logic of each of these kind of dimensions operates makes sense. It I think makes perfect sense that they are gateway drugs for each other. That makes perfect sense to me. There is a kind of logical coherence there on their part. I would say, in a way, Curtis, they're clutching at straws. It might not seem like it because they've got so much muscle. Um, and they do have a lot of muscle. And, they are able to influence powerful institutions way more than we are, and way more than the pro-Palestine movement with its multitudes and its tens and hundreds of thousands and indeed millions around the world. We haven't yet managed to capture institutional power, certainly not in this country. So it can distort and amplify the actual levels of power that I think that they have. They see that Israel's soft power, so-called, on which it relied for so very long, its cultural hegemony, is waning. It's receding rapidly, and it has been receding particularly rapidly since October 7th. And so, of course, they are, relying on methodologies which previously they weren't entirely reliant on, or even, majority reliant on. Getting the Telegraph and the Times to do their billing. The Telegraph and the Times have always been comfortably pro-Israel, but this degree of kind of agitprop and this degree of sort of arson attacks on public figures and this kind of wall-to-wall conflation of anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism, whether it's more or less effective now post October 7th, for me, it reads as a symptom of the decline of Israeli soft power and Israeli cultural hegemony around the world. It's kind of a sign and symptomatic of desperation, in my reckoning.
Yeah, and I'd see certain figures when you think of Tommy Robinson, for example, who's doing a lot of work for Israel, so that works in tandem for his views on Muslims, and it's a proxy, I feel like, for some people on the far right, that Israel is a bastion of Judeo-Christian values, and then, let's be honest, white people, in order to attack Muslims. But I agree with a lot of what you said. Do you want any final words before we move on?
Just very briefly, I mean, look, in the 1920s and 30s, British society and the right and the upper class is absolutely rife with anti-Semitism. There's no question about it. And the Balfour Declaration, as much as anything else, was a reflection of that. It was an expression of anti-Semitism. The goals of Zionism and the goals of anti-Semitism were broadly the same. Get the Jews out, put them in one place, get them out of British society as far as those upper-class anti-Semites were concerned, the black shirts and so on. The realignment around Israel, again, it makes sense now because Israel is a very successful ethno-state. It's a very successful apartheid state. And of course, there is a great deal of colorism involved and white supremacy involved in all of this as well. Israel is ruled by white people, essentially, in a part of the world that for a very, very long time, or forever, was Muslim and brown. And so, yeah, it makes perfect sense that there's been that kind of realignment. Those that were vehemently anti-Semitic in the 1920s, 30s, their kind of their their successors in the far right are now arrayed with Israel for those reasons.
Quite right. Fantastic stuff there, Kieran. But let's move on to a second story. We've got another two more stories to get through. Another day, another U-turn from this Labour government. This time it's watering down key elements of their digital ID, which is rumbled on from the Blair years. The government has dropped plans requiring workers to sign up to its digital ID scheme in order to prove their right to work in the UK. By 2029, right-to-work checks will be done digitally, for example, by using biometric passports, but registering with the new digital ID program will be optional. This marks a shift from last year when the government first announced the policy and Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer told an audience, "You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID. It's as simple as that." Now, this has drawn praise from both the left and the right. Zoe Gardner tweeted, "The U-turn on mandatory digital ID was incredibly predictable. I very much doubt scrapping jury trials will survive either. Less positively, probs not votes at 16 either. If the far right oppose something, Starmer won't do it. Farage is already the Prime Minister, really." Rupert Lowe said, "We won. Starmer abandons plans for compulsory digital ID. This is a huge win. Well done to everyone who has been fighting from all political parties and none. A team effort. It proves that we can make progress when we come together to fight this appalling Labour government." Typically, from my eyes, it seems that the Labour government is looking at what's very unpopular in society and going, "Ooh, we'll do that." But when it comes to digital IDs, the first poll that we saw, actually an outright majority of people didn't actually oppose it. Of course, it was, a lot of people did oppose it, but an outright majority didn't oppose it. Yet after the communication from this government, the way they've handled it and the way they've said, well, basically, we're doing this to crack down on illegal immigration. They didn't even put a positive, if there is a positive case, they didn't try to put a positive case why digital IDs could be good. They decided to say, oh, we're going to crack down on illegal migration. Now, polls show that the majority of people oppose it. They are so bad at politicking that a policy that not that the majority of people oppose it, now oppose it. Kieran, what are your thoughts on yet another government climb down?
I think it is obviously an expression of a manifestation of a government and a political class, but particularly a government that has never stood for anything, has actually, worse than that, has made not standing for anything a badge of honor, has made it part of its kind of, has basically made currency out of, or tried to make currency out of, not standing for anything, being post-political, if you like, being technocratic, being managerial, and leaving politics out of the picture altogether. Now, could that succeed? Even theoretically? Why not? Theoretically, maybe. But the problem with it is that it failed signally to generate anything like an electoral coalition. It failed signally to generate anything like an electoral base. I was talking about this with Aaron Bastani a while ago, and he was sort of saying, there's good stuff. There's some good stuff hidden in the budget. It's not great. It's not a socialist budget, but there's stuff in there hidden that and Labour seems so bad at kind of championing the things that they've done well, let alone, trying to hide the things that they're being called out for. And I think my answer to him was something that's worth repeating now, which is that that's not just a comms strategy or a lack of comms strategy. That's part of it, maybe, but that's kind of a superficial part of it. I think the key problem with that, and that speaks to this as well, is that there are no outriders in British civil society among the electorate, because Labour failed to build an electoral coalition. It failed to back parts of the population over others. It failed to back, say, workers from these sectors or workers altogether, whatever. So it failed to build those kind of segmented electoral pacts. And as a result, all the usual suspects criticised Labour, criticised the Starmer government. That was always going to happen. This strategy of trying to endear yourself to your enemies, whether it's GB News, whether it's Reform voters, whether it's the Times and the Telegraph, it worked in election mode because Rishi Sunak and the Tories were so cataclysmically unpopular. It worked in election mode, But the problem is that there was absolutely nothing behind it that was going to step in after winning what was a record majority. And so seeing that record majority, 175 seats, vaporize in such a short space of time is absolutely, it's almost hypnotizing to watch it happen and to see how ineffective and incompetent they are in all sorts of ways. But all of this ineffectiveness and incompetence, Curtis, is exists and operates within the context of uh, a program without political strategy and without political vision and without political beliefs.
I think you're right there. In fact, we hear people who are still trying to stick to Starmer's politics. There's fewer and fewer as time goes on. Will say, "Hey, look, it's just a communication issue," and I think that misses the point. Communication is clearly terrible, but I think that comes with the territory of having no politics or no political projects. Everything that's happened under this Labour government, I feel like the entirety of the left predicted. We said it was going to be what Jeremy Corbyn describes as a loveless landslide. We knew it was an anti-conservative vote, and that the failure for the Labour Party to build a coalition to sort of keep its support from the base, because they didn't really have a base, is that when push comes to shove, when there's going to be times in which the Labour Party or the Labour government is going to be unpopular, usually if you have a coalition, they're willing to defend you. Yeah. You think about Boris Johnson for a second. There are people out there, I mean, less populist now, but back then there were, I think, a sizable amount of people who were willing to stick with Boris Johnson despite making bad decisions. And the Labour Party used to rely on that, didn't they? They used to rely on the working class and the workers themselves. They may say, do you know what? They've made mistakes here, but they're the party of the workers and we need to defend that. But because they completely hollowed out their base, it was very easy for the cards to fall and no one would defend this Labour government. And I think the communication is a byproduct of the lack of political strategy and sort of political vision.
Yeah, I agree completely. And there are times as well, I mean, that's a truism. And I think it's true. I don't say that in a disparaging way. I think it's true in any era, but it's particularly true in some eras over others. And I do think that there is a yawning gap. There's a kind of void where a kind of visionary politics would be right now. And if it's coming from anywhere, unfortunately, even though it's predicated on lies and mythos, it's coming from the right. It's to the extent that it exists, which is a low extent, it's coming from Farage and his outriders. But there are certain times when structural conditions, economic conditions, bring to bear on social conditions in such a way that they open up a space for a much more visionary politics. And I do think, of course, we're the left. We always think that the time is nigh for that. But I do think that after COVID and with inflationary pressures that emerged from that, with the way in which massive wealth concentration became exponentially worse after COVID, and with the deterioration of public services in this country through austerity after the financial crisis and so on, the conditions were uniquely ripe for a more visionary politics. And by the way, I should say, I do think that Zach Polanski is to some extent so far filling that void as well. I don't just want to cede ground to the populist rat bag right. I do think that Zach Polanski is also doing a very good job of articulating a more visionary politics. Let's see where we go with it. But I think it's a very promising start. So yeah, I think Starmer's fucked himself, if I'm allowed to swear, on two fronts. It would be true in any political era that if you go into an election with no politics, but just by not being, sort of the inversion of the guys with the politics who have failed, and then continue that into power, you're going to fail anyway, in any era. Call it the neoliberal call it the end of history or whatever you want. Obviously, that was all bullshit. Even in such an era, you're going to be punished. Your support will vanish because you don't have any real base. But it's, I think, particularly true at this moment in time.
Yeah, I think it's true. I mean, yeah, you're right. It's something that can be true of politics more broadly, but it's emphasized much more, and I think that's more realized in the era of populism, I think. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Let's move on. But before we go into our final story, I just want to say that, of course, as you know, we are 5 volunteers trying to keep this ship going. It's 2026, and we really want big things for Turn Left. And you guys over the years have been fantastic. Whether it's turning up to shows, we're seeing the same people in our chat. I love it. Whether it's financially supporting us, it really makes a difference. We want to branch out. You know, we obviously mostly do our live shows, but you've seen we've done interviews, we've done Vox Pops, we've gone to rallies. That helps because your financial contributions. And one day we want to become a fully realized media organization where we can pay ourselves and finally have a damn studio. That is our goal. So if you would like, you can support us by going to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. You can make a one-time contribution via Patreon. Sorry, a one-time contribution via Ko-Fi, as they call it, or a monthly subscription via Patreon, or a YouTube membership for just 99p. Thank you so much. And let's go to our final story. Donald Trump has vowed to take action if Iran were to hang its protesters.
You did say the U.S. would get involved if Iran started killing protesters.
Yeah.
They have,
Yeah.
by the many thousands, according to reports.
Well, we'll see what that is. I've heard 2 numbers, but we'll see what that is.
Well, now we're hearing that they're going to start hanging protesters tomorrow. So it comes back to the question, have they crossed your red line, or has the line moved?
I haven't heard about the hanging. If they hang them, you're going to see some things that I don't know what where you come from and what your thought process is, but you'll perhaps be very happy.
What do you mean by that?
We will take very strong action. If they do such a thing, we will take very strong action.
And this strong action you're talking about, what's the end game?
The end game is to win. I like winning.
How do you define that in Iran?
Well, let's define it in Venezuela. Let's define it with al-Baghdadi. He was wiped out. Let's define it with Soleimani. And let's define it in Iran, where he wiped out their Iran nuclear threat in a period of about 15 minutes once the B-2s got there.
Of course, you know, hanging is a brutal way of killing. And whilst the US doesn't do that, it's still ironic as Trump's excuse me, let me start again. Of course, hanging is a brutal way of killing. And whilst the US doesn't do this, it's still ironic as Trump's administration is killing people, as we all saw from Minneapolis. Resident Renee Good was killed in cold blood by ICE. Now, with the US being concerned about the authoritarian government in Iran, maybe they should look at their own country first.
Several demonstrators outside an immigration building in Santa Ana were shot at close range by federal officers using rubber bullets on Friday, one of them in the face. Activists have criticized law enforcement officers involved in the immigration raids and deployed to protests for using excessive force on civilians.
Of course, we all know the West being concerned about the Iranian people has nothing to do with altruism, but rather another big opportunity for regime change backed by the US, just like in 1953. But it was this clip from Sky News in which the open racism on display is very revealing about how the West sees countries in the Middle East.
That threat of execution, the Times picking up on the face of Irfan Soltani, a 26-year-old, set for execution by Iran's regime on Wednesday, the first in response to the nationwide protests. And, you know, he's become, you know, something of a cause célèbre because he looks sort of a Western, identifiable man.
He does. He looks like he could be somebody you walk past on the street.
Hey, look, we have to care. You know, he looks white. He could be one of our own. Really astonishing stuff. Kieran, what are your thoughts on the way in which the legacy media have conducted themselves when covering these Iran protests?
I mean, it's the first time I'm seeing that clip. That is astonishing when they give themselves away so blatantly. The way that the legacy media is covering it is, as you would predict, it sees Iranians that are anti-regime. It considers them full-bodied, flesh and blood human beings with an emotional life and human rights. And of course, it, by comparison, and in comparison in regards to the way that it has spoken about and reported on Palestinians dying and continuing to die in Gaza in the most barbaric, torturous conditions, it regards them as subhuman. I mean, there's no other conclusion to draw, is there? There's absolutely no other conclusion to draw. Palestinians dying means nothing to the media. And I don't want to go on a tangent too much about Palestine because we're talking about Iran, but it's particularly fresh for me right now, for all of us. We can see it in rude health, in vivid display, that the people in the streets toiling for, in some cases or in many cases, we can't quantify it, very legitimately, their own freedom, their rights. They are to be conferred with the status of hero immediately, only because they're on our side. It's the most unbelievably disparaging compliment that the media could possibly pay to these people risking their lives fighting their regime, because it shows them, or it suggests to them, to the extent that they're paying attention, which they're probably not, that they are just deployed as pawns in a game of Western statecraft. And when they're useful, they will be treated as human beings. They will be reported as heroes. And as soon as they're not useful anymore, nobody will be paying any attention, certainly not the Donald Trumps of the world. And we saw the same thing in Iraq, I'm sorry to say. The Kurds, I'm old, I'm very old, Curtis. I'm old enough to remember the build up to the war in Iraq quite clearly. And I can remember for 6 months in the run up to the war in Iraq, run up to March 2003, I've never seen so many Kurdish Iraqis on TV before or since. And I don't say that to be, I don't know, performatively glib or something. The Kurds in Iraq have been treated absolutely abysmally by Saddam Hussein. There's no question about that. But they were trotted out onto television thinking that they were going to get an independent Kurdish state. They were used by the legacy media. They were used by the neoconservatives. And then, of course, when everything started to descend into quagmire, when everything started to go to shit, nobody talked about the Kurds anymore in Iraq. They were simply trotted out for that reason. And I'm afraid that the demonstrators in Iraq, without a credible plan, without something that ensures Iraq doesn't become a failed state with 92 million people in it, the same is being done to the protesters in Iran now.
It's fascinating to watch because you're seeing many right-wing figures. Again, I bring up Tommy Robinson, who is suddenly, fighting the cause for Iran. And you're seeing the same people speak up for Israelis and speak up for Iranians. Now, of course, I believe they're two very different reasons, right? One of those, of course, is ethno-nationalism. Of course, a lot of people on the right like the policies of Israel and want to copy them and bring them over here. But when it comes to Iran, it's not necessarily race superiority for Iranians. I mean, these are brown bodies. Let's be honest, when it comes to the far right, they hate them. But it's about Western imperialism. And it's very fascinating to see, quite in plain sight, in which Western foreign policy, particularly US foreign policy, is so brazen and so obvious. I was speaking to someone about the Iranian protest when it first sort of broke out again. I know it's been happening for a long time, but when it first broke out again, and they said, I'm kind of happy that Trump is so obvious, because at the end of the day, you know your enemy, and it's easy to fight against rather than some sort of soft power covert operation. It's like, international law doesn't matter. But I do find it very interesting that you have the right wing jumping on Iran. And of course, they don't care about the people there. And the way in which the media, I think, talks about this is very black and white. The corporate media works on sound bites. It's about 5-minute conversations. There's no nuance. And you have to pick a side. You're either a Western puppet or you love, regimes and dictatorial regimes.
Right.
Of course, both can be true. You can support the pro-democracy movement in Iran, speak about the human rights abuses, whilst also not wanting Iran to be a pawn of US hegemony.
Quite right. And also not wanting Iran to descend into failed state quagmire.
Mm.
I mean, I there's a very real danger of that, and the danger is exacerbated by the types of personalities, as you rightly allude to, Curtis, that are lining up to support Iran now. They, Nigel Farage, Tommy Robinson, Donald Trump, whoever else, Marco Rubio. These people are the jackals of jackals. They do not give a flying fuck about another human life. They don't care about each other or their closest out. Really, they care about them to the extent that they bolster their power. They care about absolutely nothing. And so the idea that these people are going to be there when the going gets tough, as it inevitably will in Iran if the regime is decapitated. And again, like you just eloquently said, it is absolutely possible to support pro-democracy movements inside Iran that are genuinely grassroots and, deplore aspects of what the regime has done to its people over the years, while also acknowledging the realpolitik, which is that, failed states, a regime change, they have got a very, very troubling track record. And Iran is a very, very complex country. And so I can't see that ending well right now. It's possible that the demonstrators agitate, and through agitation, they gradually weaken the Iranian regime, and that leads to, a wellspring of power competitors to the Iranian state that have the wherewithal to take the machinery of the state, to take Iranian institutions into the end of the decade, the next decade, or whenever this happens. It's possible that process is underway, and it's possible that it kind of becomes stronger, but we're not there yet. It's obvious that we're not there yet. No serious analyst of Iran says that that's the case. And so regime change, even from within, it seems to me, would lead to a power vacuum.
Quite right. And I think as well, many people in the media seem to think that, okay, maybe it's not ideal that Western forces are, sort of instituting regime change, but you're going to get better human rights. I think a lot of people on the ground who don't immerse themselves in in this politics might think that too. But that's not always the case. In fact, often, even when US coups happen, it's brutal for the people. I mean, if you think about, again, 1953, the CIA-backed coup, it was a brutal regime up until the Iranian Revolution. Of course, obviously, the Iranian Revolution wasn't a fully progressive. It didn't turn out to be a fully progressive society, but it was fighting against a CIA diktat. When you think about Chile, you had the socialist Allende bringing in amazing social reforms, reducing child poverty, using the state for the good of the people, and then a CIA, or a US-backed coup in Pinochet turned it into a dictatorship, and it was brutal for the people. So I think a lot of people get in this trap. There's like a false dichotomy here, whereas like, okay, well, it's not ideal that America or the West has to take over, but, Western values and all that, maybe that's better for the people. Are you sure about that? I don't think it's particularly good when it comes to Venezuela, when they want to use and plunder the resources. When it comes to oil, for example, they're going to treat their people well, because when the people rise up, look, people are not happy. When Maduro was kidnapped, those that didn't even support Maduro, like, we don't want a American-backed government. I've just actually had some breaking news from my producer on the story. The government have temporarily closed the British embassy in Iran. This is amid rising tensions. This will now operate remotely, so Foreign Office travel advice has now been updated to reflect the consular change. So we've got some new information there. Did you want to have a final words before we wrap this one up?
I think it's important that you talk about the violence that could emanate from it. When I say failed state regime change, I sort of assume that's implicit, but it's right. You're right to make it explicit and highlight it. The fact that Reza Pahlavi, the son of the last Shah, also called Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the fact that he is being proffered, he's being foisted forward as the best hope of a successor to a decapitated regime, further underscores for me how unserious this entire thing is. However serious some of the people who are losing their lives, and let's not forget that, I don't want to, be disparaging about them. The people that are losing their lives in earnest, toiling and fighting for democracy in their country or for more freedom or for less oppression, however you want to think of it, the fact that Reza Pahlavi is framing himself as their leader, I think is hugely disrespectful to them. And it really does bespeak the unseriousness or unpreparedness, strategically speaking, of any kind of successor movement or regime. Reza Pahlavi's father, as you rightly said, Curtis, was brutal. He was particularly brutal from the sort of early 1960s onwards. But I think the key thing is that he only survived in power. There were dictators in the 20th century that were far, far more brutal than him. And there is actually an argument that when the Revolutionary Guard and the revolution looked like it was starting to germinate, he actually wasn't decisive enough. He wasn't violent enough, some of his critics said, right, in order to put it down. If he was being a really, Pinochet-style dictator, and I think there's some truth to that. He had been violent earlier on, and he had been very oppressive. But I think for me, the key thing is not so much he was a brutal dictator. He was to an extent. It's that he only lasted in power. He only existed artificially because he was propped up by the United States and Britain from the very beginning. And when we say propped up, we don't just mean they said, don't remove this guy, he's our guy. They funded his secret police. In fact, they created an additional secret police force for him, which basically kept him in power artificially until 1979. And he was always totally deluded about his level of popularity. And the reason I mention that now is not just to talk about history. I see the same delusion utterly replicated in his son. His son, as a final thing, Curtis, in 1980, the year that his dad died, the year after the revolution, he died, the last Shah, and his son, who was then 19, proclaimed himself the new Shah at the age of 19. The guy thinks he has a divine right to rule. He lives in Maryland. He's got zero experience of the real world, let alone running a country as complex as Iran. So there we go.
Very well put. Brilliantly put. It's also interesting. You can see some sort of parallels with the US. Speaking about secret police, speaking about unpopular leaders. Well, we've got ICE in America, which is like a secret police with, right, yes, an unpopular leader. So it's interesting with these parallels. Let's end that story there, and we're going to go to our comments. I know we're going to have some fantastic comments. We have some really good stories. Of course, Kieran on the show. Of course, a lot of people are going to be excited. Callum,
hello.
Can we hear you?
I assume so. I can hear you. Hi everybody. Brilliant show as always. I think some of our members were placing bets on who was producing tonight, and they got it wrong. So
got it wrong.
But it's all right. It's all right. I don't take any offence that you would rather see Sarah and Lewis in the producer's seat. I've been away for a while, so I forgive you all for not expecting it to be me. Starting with some super chats, we've got James Holmes has gifted 5 Turn Left memberships. Thank you so much, James, for those. Who's at 93 also just became a member, as did Ride Feather as well. And just a quick shout out to Mr. Pike Bishop, to Ruth, to Dowd, to Martin, and De Wolfie as well, who received the memberships from James Holmes.
Legends, thank you.
Ride
so
Feathers
much.
actually gifted 5 of them, and they've gone to AC, to Be in Dinner, to Scarcreed, something like that. Matt, Nomad FX1 as well. And Deus Ex Ollie has also gifted 5 Turn Left memberships as well, and they've gone to Sick of Drawing Cowboys, Audrey, to Julian, to No CQ, and to that one, a nice guy as well. So thank you all for those. They're always appreciated, and like we always say, we do really appreciate your support. Where to start today? We'll start at the bottom and work our way up, I think. Who's at 93 has said, given all the news out of the US just in 2026, Trump has set the precedent that we could invade and kidnap him and Melania to seek justice for his crimes. Obviously, this is one that's been put around quite a bit since the action that Trump took in Venezuela. What are your thoughts on that one?
Kieran?
We're going to meet. Yeah, I think that is a statement that feeds off a wider truth about the international rules-based order, which is that it's clearly now just the law of the jungle predominating. And I think that we've reached a new threshold with the kidnapping of Maduro. But the total desecration, and look, we're on the left, we all know that international law was at best very, very partial. But we've seen the total torching and desecration of international law in the aftermath of October 7th. And, politicians might not take it seriously because they think that it's consequenceless. But we did say the next time you try to invoke the sacred cow of international law and the rules-based order to try and persuade us to go to war against someone or to take umbrage about something or to be outraged in a given context, we're going to tell you all to fuck off. And so
Yeah.
I see your comment as a cameo within that.
Yeah.
It's quite sick listening to Keir Starmer talk about international law about Greenland. It's like, you can shut the fuck up, Keir. You've got no leg to stand on. Yeah. And I'm just thinking, look, if another country invades the US and kidnaps Trump and Melania, fucking tough luck. That's take your medicine, take your medicine, essentially, because you can do it to other countries, and the entire point of international law is a mutual beneficial thing, supposedly. So if someone just intervenes and, kidnaps Trump, I'm going to sit back and think, well, you fucking got what you wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. Jim said, sounds like Cal upgraded his mic. It's not an upgraded mic. It's what I sound like after having a cold for a while. I didn't have a voice of about a few days ago, so
maybe they like the new sickness voice.
Maybe
is
that's
it like
what it
on
is.
Phoebe from Friends when she gets ill and she likes the new voice?
Yeah, it's because it's deeper and more more resonant. But yeah. On to obviously more serious matters. Oh, and who's at 93, by the way, is Eric. So hi, Eric. Didn't realise it was you. Just in terms of what's been going on in the States, Sly Loris has also pointed out about the fact that they beat up that poor teenage Target employee. There's a common theme occurring now of these ICE agents going after American citizens.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, even when they're in
not
work.
surprising.
So,
Can I quickly read out my favourite comment, which I'm seeing in the sidebar?
Go for it.
Go for it. I've just brought Azami's up, but go for it.
The wannabe Shah, looks like Frankie Vincent's character from The Sopranos. It's so true. And I think actually the character even muses on that. Says Tony Soprano used to say I look like the Shah of Iran. Very great comment. Great.
Azami123 has said,
legend.
I just think the Labour front bench are very corrupt. Most of them know they won't get in again, so they're trying to get as much dosh as possible. This came up obviously when we were discussing Labour's U-turns on ID, mandatory digital ID. Do you think there is an element of that here? We see a lot of these front benchers going out and doing the media rounds. We had Hardy Alexander's clip up earlier, and they're making such a show of it. But do you think they've just gone past the point of caring now, where it's just like, well, they know they're not going to be in power in the next election anyway, so they've just lost any semblance of principles that they may have once had?
Curtis, do you want to take this first?
Yeah, I think they believe in their own delusion, so I don't think it's they've sort of resigned from it and they know they're going to lose the next election and that's it. I think many people at the top of the Labour Party love the smell of their own farts. Morgan McSweeney loves the smell of his own farts. So they probably think that the voters are delusional. And they think that come the next election, they're going to rally behind the Labour Party because they're the adults in the room. So I don't think it's necessarily the case. Obviously, there's a cohort of Labour MPs who do believe that, and that's why they've quit the government or they've spoken out against the government. But really, the core team, no, I think they really think that they're going to win the next election. They think that reform is just a temporary blip, because fundamentally these guys don't believe in populism. They don't think we live in an era of populism. So how can reform ever win? You know, it's only the Labour, the Conservatives. Get real, guys, because we're in a different era, and populism, whether it's left or right populism, is taking hold.
Yeah. Very briefly, I agree with all of that. I think that it's very tempting to fall back on nostalgia and say the quality of politicians declined and things were much better in this. Actually, it is undeniable, and there are complex reasons for it, which we won't go into now. But it is undeniable that if you take a snapshot of the Labour front bench, say now, and compare it to the Labour front bench of the 1970s, say 76 to 79, that government, it is 74 to 79, excuse me, it is incomparable in terms of the intellect, the learning, and a lot of these were working class people in that government. I'm not being a snob. I'm not inadvertently kind of making an argument for elitism. A lot of those, Barbara Castle, a lot of those people, they did go to Oxbridge, a lot of them, but they came from working class backgrounds. And so that's why I say there are complex reasons for it, social mobility based reasons and beyond. But this, I think it's not just Labour. We have to be fair. A lot of the Tories in the previous government, cabinets and so on, were also utterly craven and utterly mercenary and just interested in credentialism, and to the extent that they were able to, as politicians, lining their pockets, and jockeying to become prime minister. It's a very shameful state of affairs.
Yeah. Staying on the topic of digital ID, Adam and Law has said, why the fuck does anyone think it was a good idea at any point? It wasn't. Enough people just pulled their bloody heads out of the sand. I mean, what's your thoughts on this one? Because there does seem to be a sort of a feeling of even those in government who were promoting this as a brilliant idea only a few months ago now seem to have sort of rolled back. Is it because it's had so much opposition from both left and right? Is it that, or is it just that it just wasn't well thought out to begin with?
I just think it wasn't well thought out to begin with. I think it was probably the fingerprint left by a focus group or something, or a couple of focus groups. And that was probably enough. Or Morgan McSweeney or someone around him thought that they had a really, fantastic idea. Whatever it was, I think it was very poorly thought through. It's also possible the government thought, well, look, there's all this controversy around, there is a genuine problem with people working in a way that isn't safe for them. Now, obviously, the way you deal with that is not through this, right? The way you deal with that is to stop capitalism, essentially, or capitalist exploitation. But they probably thought, well, we're not going to do that. Short of that, there is a genuine problem with people working in conditions that aren't safe. But maybe there was an element of that, but that's being extremely generous. I also think maybe they thought, well, this will please the right and elements of the sort of centre that do think that too many people have come here to work, because we'll neaten everything up and there'll be a database and it's evidence-led and it's technocratic, and it appealed to them on that basis. Whatever the kind of rationale was, it was clearly utterly a ridiculous plan.
This also makes a complete shambles of the argument that they made, right? Because they tried to pitch this as being some form of solution to illegal immigration and people working who didn't have the right to work. And they're now saying, well, you're not going to have that ID, but we are still going to do digital checks. But a lot of the checks that they do are digital anyway. So I don't really see how.
Yeah, it's totally.
The two things obviously can't be true. It clearly. I mean, we know it had nothing to do with immigration. They just thought that they'd, win a few votes by saying it.
Right.
But this once again just proves that they don't have a clue what they're talking about, do they?
Go on. Sorry.
No. I mean, I agree. There's nothing to really add to that. I completely agree.
Well, just still on the same topic then, I just want to bring this point in that
Mm.
was raised as well, because I thought this was quite an interesting point raised by Anon, so thanks for this, which was they need to make it clear that non-British or Irish people are already forced to use digital ID to prove their right to work in the UK. It's called an e-visa. Town Left need to emphasise this. Well, thanks to your comment, we will. Yeah, it's true. People that aren't British or Irish, people that are non-British or Irish that want to work in the UK, they have to have an e-visa, which is already a digital form of right to work. And that is mandatory. You can't work in the UK without it.
Yeah.
So actually, with that in mind, this wouldn't have made any impact on illegal working anyway. Because if you're somebody that's not British born and you're working in the UK without the legal right to, you're already required to have digital ID. So they're still clearly able to work without that. So it's not even going to fix the problem.
But when you don't have any politics and you don't have any vision, you're only left with vibes. You're only left with, okay, let's try and capture headlines and fool this group of people or fool that group of people. When you haven't done the hard work of building an electoral coalition, and because you don't have politics or vision, much less vision, that is what you're left with. You're left with scrambling around for vibes and hoping the politics of hoping that people don't notice.
I think this policy is actually a microcosm of the entirety of the Labour project, because typically, if you were to compare the UK and the US, there's a far bigger cohort of people who love their so-called freedom. They hate authoritarianism, supposedly. Of course, they demonstrate that they actually love it. If you look at ICE, for example, right? But there's that big freedom movement. We care about our freedom. In the UK, not so much. In fact, British people are quite authoritarian. They're happy for more policing, etc., to deal with crime. But something has clearly shifted in which the Labour Party haven't grasped. And I don't think they realised that. I think they thought, do you know what? Most people could accept digital IDs because there isn't that sort of anti-government or sort of US kind of style libertarian freedom in this country. And that is true, but I think that's changing. And I think that's something that Reform, as much as I despise them, are experts at, particularly Nigel Farage, because when it comes to a cashless society, you're hearing Nigel Farage say stuff like, we need to protect cash. And for me and you, or people watching the show, that's probably not a big deal. We just whack our card out and tap stuff and that's it. But for, I think, in more rural areas and older people, it might not seem like a big deal, but it is. And I feel like that's part of a nostalgia thing, potentially. And you're seeing Reform tap into that energy. You're seeing Reform saying, we need to protect cash, in the same way in which you're seeing Reform and people like Rupert Lowe saying this is an infringement on our rights. And I think there is a shift in which more and more people are taking that sort of American sort of libertarian freedom idea, and it's working over here. And I think the Labour Party completely miscalculated on it. I think they, as you said, Kieran, believed in their own sort of technocratic idea of, well, this works, this is very, very good, and people would just buy it. And another layer to this is the fact, what I mentioned earlier, is I think they would have been more successful if they said, look, it's really good, here's the benefits for it. But when you say, oh, it's to curb illegal immigration, I don't think people buy that.
Yeah, agreed.
Moving on to some of our, the first story. Dubs has said, I'm so sick of these Zionist anti-Semitic loons. They are so brainwashed. We all know they are the biggest propaganda pushers. The world is awake. Bibi knows this. It's crumbling slowly.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's an inverse correlation, guys, between... By the way, I love this chat. I mean, it's your viewers are lovely people, and it's great to be here with you all. But yeah, there's an inverse correlation. This is what I was sort of alluding to earlier, between the ferocity of the Israel lobby's kind of coercive techniques and forms of compellence or impellence, and the degree to which the romantic Israel, the idealistic Israel, the left, the inherently left liberal Israel, exists in the public imagination. Clearly, the latter is vanishingly small these days, if it exists at all. And so there's that inverse correlation at play again.
Yeah. Curtis?
I won't add anything to that. I thought that was expertly put. But you are right. We have a great community and great chat.
We always do. Speaking of great chat, Duck's brought something up. Duck Authorities brought something up that we've mentioned before, but it can never be understated, which is it also serves to increase actual anti-Semitism, conflating support for Israel with Judaism. And we see this all the time where the two are conflated, and it's usually people that are trying to argue that, it's usually the people that are accusing people of anti-Semitism because they've criticized Israel that are actually the ones who are themselves being anti-Semitic. And it's something that people need to certainly remember and certainly be aware of when we're having these conversations. To the way that this story unfolded, where the media immediately jumped to this idea that the MP was banned from attending the school because he was Jewish. It's like, no. It's got nothing to do with the fact that it's Jewish. It's got everything to do with his support for the Israeli genocide against the people of Gaza. It's got everything to do with his support for Netanyahu and for the massacres that we have seen unfold, not just over the last couple of years, but over the last 70 to 80 years at the hands of the Israeli government in Palestine. The man's religion, the man's ethnicity has fuck all to do with it. And by assuming and jumping to the conclusion that the reason that he was banned was, well, yeah, because he supports Israel, but it's actually because he's Jewish and you're anti-Semitic for doing so, you are conflating the two. It's not anti-Semitic to criticize the Israeli government. It's not.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, and that point, just two attending points there. Number one, that's the main mode in which the conflation of the two operates danger-wise. But there is another level, which is that you allow genuine anti-Semites to camouflage themselves among very good anti-Zionist people who simply don't like fucking genocide, right? Yeah. That's another thing, is you give cover to those people because they do exist in the world. And the other point is that how incredibly depressing that the people that claim to care more about Jews and Jewish safety than anyone in the world know that they're doing this. They know they are not stupid. They think we're stupid. They are not stupid. They know that by their actions and by that very systematic, relentless, instrumental conflation of the two things, they are absolutely putting Jews around the world in the firing line of more danger. They know that. And so, again, I said earlier, jackal of jackals, they are nihilists. They claim to be, nihilism is obviously a big part of Zionism, really, the way it actually operates. But these people are nihilists. They don't care about Jews, whether it's in so-called Israel or anywhere else. They do not. They're total nihilists.
Yeah, it's truly sick and disgusting the way in which the Jewish community is weaponized. And you're bang on insofar that there are opportunists who don't care about Jewish people who have jumped on the pro-Palestine movement. And you're seeing so-called normies who wouldn't know these people otherwise are going, yeah, that person's right. You're seeing the Tucker Carlsons and the Candace Owens of the world who are saying the right things. And for many people who have never heard of these people before and think, oh, these guys are pretty based, without knowing their political history. I know that's a small cohort, but again, you're absolutely right. Another layer in which anti-Semitism has come about from the actions of Israel and the way Zionists are behaving.
Yeah, indeed. Agreed. I'm distracted by some of the other comments in the chat, which are I think getting funnier and funnier as the show goes on.
Yeah, I think they're getting more deranged as the time goes on.
There's
It
some that are
happens a
just
lot.
coming through. Is it? It's always the way with
good on
our lot, but they're a wonderful bunch. Speaking of them being a wonderful bunch, actually, just a few before we go. So Becca said when you were introduced at the start of the show, Kieran, oh fantastic, Kieran is lovely, lovely young man.
Oh, Becca, thank you. I've seen some of your comments popping up. Most grateful to you.
And we've got CPND who said Navarra and Turn Left, loving the collab. Well, look, we're all friends. We've got to work together. You know, it's bigger than just left wing commentators. You know what I mean? We've got to fight on our hands at the
You
moment.
bet.
And,
I mean, I had a funny message from Gary on Instagram when Harriet Williamson came on. He was like, "Are you stealing all our people?" I was like, "Well, hey, you stole Helena, so this this is payback." He's like, "The battle's on." So
and my favourite comment of the night from James Holmes, who said, "Yeah, you escaped Navarra Towers just to be confronted by the team Ubastani."
Well, look, if you'll have me back and I can escape Navarra Tower, occasionally the guards let their guard down
yeah,
to escape. So
No, this is becoming a running theme. This, you know, because I've said this. There's other Navarra contributors have spoken about being, needing to escape. You know, I think Ash has spoken about it, and somebody else has spoken about it as well. You know,
I think it might have been Harriet. Yeah,
was it Harriet?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's becoming a theme that you're all locked in a basement somewhere.
We need to reassure our viewers that it's safe. I mean, look, I've been to Navarra Towers. I haven't been frisked, so I think it's safe. But maybe they were on their best behavior that day.
I tell you what it is. No, you're right. No, they're always on their best behavior. But I tell you what it is. It's that for so long as a kind of hangover from COVID, they had even though we were in the same building or rooms that were next door to each other, I would have to go into a separate little room.
It's the prison room, isn't it?
The prison room.
Yeah.
And
so Harriet was locked up.
For a long time, I said, guys, come on, we can be in the same room. And now I'm delighted to say we are in the same room.
Yes. Loving the new setup.
Never look back on that. But yeah, I think that's where it derives from.
Okay.
But yeah, loving the new.
As long as we can assure that you're all safe, then that's
Was that convincing? Was that convincing?
Well, I think I was convinced, but yes, no, good new setup. I love this. You got the duo thing going on in the studio, so good stuff.
Yeah. But listen, thank you very much.
That's all the comments.
I'll
cool.
step back. Yeah, that's it. Well, I mean, it's not. We could go all night with our wonderful community, but yeah, that's it for now.
Well, okay. Well, thank you so much, Callum, for producing. Thank you to all the commenters. You, as always, have been fantastic. And of course, thank you so much to Kieran. I want you back on the show ASAP, but I really appreciate you giving me your time tonight.
Well, it's been an absolute romp. I've had a great time. All you have to do, Curtis, is ask me and I'll come back.
Perfect. Consider it done.
Yes.
Of course, remember to please like this stream. And if you're not a subscriber, then please hit that button. If you want us to grow, then you can head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There is a link to our Patreon where you can support us monthly, or follow the other link to give us a one-time contribution. Alternatively, you can become a YouTube member for 99p. I'm Curtis Daly. You've been watching Normal Islands Live. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.